The day before I was taken away from the orphanage, the girl who had been bullying me snatched my identification and took my place, becoming the real daughter of the wealthy family who had been lost for 15 years, and I was lying in the shabby attic, smiling as I bid farewell to the person who had been bullying me. I wish you a pleasant journey, mobile kidney source. I was reborn. Reborn on the day before I was taken away by the wealthy family. The girl who had been bullying me for more than 10 years cornered me in the orphanage toilet and asked for the identification that represented the identity of the wealthy family. Grace, you're ugly and dirty, you don't deserve to go to such a rich family, why don't you give it to me? Bella's pretty face was full of malice. She said she was asking me for it, but in fact, she directly snatched my identification. In my previous life, I was beaten black and white by her. But I still refused to hand it over. In the end, it was brought to the orphanage director, and Bella was just lightly scolded. In this life, I watched as the identity card was snatched, and I even put on a cowardly look, asking her timidly, if I give this to you, you won't hit me, right? Bella got what she wanted and looked at me in surprise. Of course, with this, I'll be the young lady of the Collins family. From now on, you don't even have the qualification to talk to me. After that, she patted the non-existent dust on her body and swaggered out of the toilet. I slowly got up, the corners of my mouth curving into a smile, and then the uncontrollable laughter echoed in the toilet. Thank goodness, God heard my plea and gave me a chance to live again. In my previous life, I was bullied in the orphanage until I was 15. I was finally taken home by the wealthy family, thinking that I would enjoy the long-lost family affection. Who would have known that I would meet a spoiled sister, a gloomy eldest brother, and selfish parents? And I was taken home just because my brother Charles needed a fresh kidney. My parents didn't care about my life or death. When I was bullied by my sister until I was 18, I was pushed onto the operating table and had my kidney removed while I was conscious. In the end, I died of a viral infection. During the 3 months in the hospital bed, I pleaded with God countless times to give me another chance at life. I would definitely make all those who bullied me pay the price. By the grace of God, I was actually reborn. The gears of fate have just started to turn, and it's still not too late. The next morning, Bella stood beside the director, wearing a beautiful dress and looking clean and cute. When the parents of the Collins family who came to pick someone up saw Bella, a trace of joy flashed in their eyes. And they opened their arms to Bella beside the luxury car. Tears welled up in Bella's beautiful eyes, and she threw herself into Mrs. Collins' arms and started crying. The director smiled with tears in her eyes. There were dense reporters around, competing to report the news of the Collins family recognizing their daughter. What a touching scene of recognizing their daughter, and I was hiding in the attic, watching this ridiculous show through the window. Watching Mrs. Collins hold Bella's hand and get into the luxury car, I smiled and bid her farewell. I wish you a pleasant journey, my dear mobile kidney source. After Bella left, the days passed peacefully. There was no one bullying me in the orphanage, and there was no news from the Collins family. This was actually a good thing, indicating that Bella's kidney was, luckily, a match for Charles. And the Collins family didn't suspect Bella's identity, because I gave up my identification. The director's attitude towards me improved a lot. She even gave me a sum of money, saying it was to praise me for doing well in the high school entrance examination and bringing honor to the orphanage. On the surface, I was overwhelmed with gratitude, but secretly I laughed. The day before Bella left, the director had mocked me for only knowing how to study hard and actually being very dull. I used this money to pay the tuition fee for a key high school and became a student in the experimental class of the school. This high school had a good academic atmosphere and a high rate of students getting into key universities, since the students mainly took the college entrance examination route. Even though the students in the experimental class were either rich or noble, everyone was quite well behaved, and no one discriminated against me, an orphan, in the first week of the new semester. The head teacher, seeing that my science scores in the high school entrance examination were not high, specially arranged for me to sit next to a math competition student. My new deskmate's name was Louis. He was tall and handsome, and he was the only heir of the wealthy Santos family. Most importantly, he was the fiancé that the Collins family had chosen for the daughter of the Collins family, Grace. I heard that you have a good relationship with Louis. Can you give me his WeChat? The art committee member leaned on my desk and asked me with a smile. I just ask him questions, and we're not friends on WeChat, but if you need it, I can get it for you, I answered while organizing my notes. No, I was just saying, When the art committee member saw Louis coming, she quickly got up and left me a bottle of yogurt. Louis sat down and casually picked up my organized notes. His well-defined fingers touched mine. I shrank my hand back like I had been electrocuted. Louis was stunned for a moment, and then he calmly pointed out a small mistake in my notes. My grades weren't outstanding when I entered the school. Fortunately, I wasn't stupid. After half a semester, I was already the second in the grade, second only to Louis. After the grades were announced, Louis asked me out for the first time. We went to a coffee shop in the city center to study. The clothes given by the orphanage were old and out of style. So I simply wore my school uniform to the appointment. Louis looked at me, hesitating to speak. I said indifferently, "I'm an orphan, I don't have money to buy clothes." From then on, Louis also wore his school uniform when he asked me out. At the end of the first semester of senior high school, news came from the Collins family that Bella was dead. It was rumored that she committed suicide by jumping off a building after a bout of depression. At the funeral, Charles, who had been ill and bedridden all year, looked energetic as he accompanied his sister's coffin. The media praised him for his deep brother-sister affection. In fact, he was probably thanking Bella for her kidney. The orphanage director cried the most pitifully. I knew that because Bella was the director's daughter. The day after I got the news, Louis asked me out. I deliberately put on the dress I bought with my scholarship. The burgundy color made me look even more beautiful. When Louis saw me, he was speechless for a long time. Finally, his ears turned red and he asked me why I was dressed so beautifully. I wrote down the final answer to the last question in the exam paper with a pen and looked up and smiled. Because today is my birthday. Louis opened his eyes wide, and then he got up and went to the cake shop across the street. 15 minutes later, an 8-inch cake appeared in front of me. Louis rolled up his sleeves and helped me light the candles. I closed my eyes and made a wish. On the other side of the street, the director carried Bella's urn and scattered paper money all over the street. A piece of paper money was blown to my feet by the autumn wind and finally stepped on by me. "Bella, thank you. Your life is the best birthday present I've ever received." 2 months after Bella's death, Charles had a serious rejection reaction to the newly transplanted kidney and died despite rescue efforts. After all, Bella wasn't Charles's real sister. And the kidney didn't match Charles well. What I could think of, the parents of the Collins family could also think of. Besides their grief, they tested Bella's DNA again, and sure enough, they found out that she was a fake daughter. With the wealth of the Collins family, it was obvious that they could find out Bella's true identity. The director's trick of swapping identities was quickly exposed, and the parents of the Collins family took their pain of losing their son out on the director. After the summer vacation, the original director of the orphanage disappeared mysteriously, and a new director took office and took over the orphanage. The Collins family only had Kathy left as a child. To ensure the safety of the family heir, the Collins family looked for the lost daughter again. This time, they found me. I played a big show in front of the media with them and successfully pulled up the stock price of the Collins family, which had plummeted because of Charles's death. The days after I returned to the Collins family were not easy. Because of my arrival, Kathy's status as the heir of the Collins family was shaken again after Charles's death. So on the first day I came, Kathy threw all my luggage into the basement. She blocked the door and wouldn't let me into the room, calling me a bastard and a whelp from a dirty place. The Collins family doted on their little daughter. They turned a blind eye and simply found a room in the basement and turned it into my room. Kathy thought she had won a complete victory and became even more arrogant. On the first day of school in September, I deliberately sat in the wrong seat and used Kathy's cutlery to eat. Sure enough, Kathy was so angry that she jumped up and slapped me hard, and then splashed milk on my school uniform. I touched my clothes and then picked up a knife and slashed at Kathy's face. Kathy couldn't avoid it, and a deep cut appeared on her face, before she could cry out. I slapped her again to make her shut up. Looking at the person who had been arrogant in my previous life cowering at my feet in fear, I felt extremely satisfied. I bent down and smiled at Kathy. "I know you had a hand in Charles's death, so you'd better keep a low profile." A look of panic flashed in Kathy's eyes when her secret was exposed, but she quickly hid it. Mrs. Collins rushed to the scene. When she saw the blood oozing from Kathy's face, she was shocked. Just as she was about to deal with me, she saw the clothes I was wearing and fell silent. This was Charles's school uniform that I found in the basement. Charles had good grades, just like me. Before he took a leave of absence from school, he was my senior. "Grace, why are you wearing your brother's clothes?" Mrs. Collins frowned and asked me. I pretended to be scared and glanced at Kathy, then lowered my head and mumbled, "My sister accidentally spilled paint on me." "So I'm wearing my brother's clothes." Mrs. Collins immediately started scolding Kathy and even ignored the bleeding wound on Kathy's face. I curved my eyes at Kathy and then carried my school bag and went out. In my previous life, Mrs. Collins was patriarchal. She even discussed with Charles that if my kidney wasn't suitable, they would sacrifice Kathy and transplant a kidney again. In this life, Charles was dead, but Kathy was still alive. Which meant that Kathy already knew she would be the sacrifice and had avoided this crisis, and I used Charles's school uniform to awaken Kathy's memory of being treated as a sacrifice by the Collins family. You see, in your mother's eyes, even a school uniform of Charles's is more important than your injury. When I got to school, Louis saw me wearing the obviously ill-fitting school uniform and frowned. "Grace, whose clothes are you wearing?" I took off the big and old clothes and casually said, "Charles's." Kathy ruined my clothes. As a wealthy family, Louis naturally knew about me recognizing my family. Louis was silent for a moment. Then he took off his school uniform and draped it over me. The smell of woody fragrance enveloped me. I lowered my head. I was wearing a white short-sleeved shirt under my school uniform, and if I raised my hand a little, I would expose myself. "Thank you." I thanked him sincerely. Louis's ears turned red, and he lowered his head and didn't look at me. But he still replied, "I gave you the clothes. I have a new one." I smiled and shook my head, and I took the initiative to pat his hand on the table. "No need, I'm transferring to the foreign language high school tomorrow, so I don't need to wear this school uniform anymore." When Louis heard this, he looked at me in surprise. Before he could speak, I stood up and gave him a hug, and then I took the books in the drawer and left. Louis didn't expect me to take the initiative to contact him. And he stood there in a daze. The driver of the Collins family came to pick me up at the school gate and took me to the foreign language high school. A few days later, Kathy returned to school after recovering from her facial injury and led a group of people to corner me in the restroom. The girls who were using the restroom saw Kathy leading a large group of people rushing in and immediately stepped out voluntarily. I heard the commotion outside while I was in the restroom cubicle. So I just stood there, waiting for them to make trouble. Kathy ordered her lackeys to pick up the restroom trash bin, intending to pour its contents over the top of the cubicle door. In my past life, I'd been in this exact situation. Back then, I'd endured it submissively, silently bearing the trash that rained down on me, and fled the restroom in tears amidst their laughter. Even the driver sent by the Collins family to pick me up refused to take me home, complaining that the stench on me would be a hassle to clean off the car and suggesting I walk instead. When I got home, I was met with Mrs. Collins' scolding and Kathy's gloating. Mrs. Collins said that photos of me in that state had been posted online, bringing shame to the Collins family. During the 3 months I spent in the hospital bed, I dreamed of nothing but escaping from that restroom cubicle. This time, I finally had the chance. While they were moving the trash bin, I took 2 steps back, stepped on the handle, and flipped over the door. I landed right beside Kathy. Before Kathy could even react, I grabbed her by the hair and stuffed her into the trash bin they just moved over. The girls around us were stunned, never having seen Kathy in such a sorry state. Kathy struggled wildly, her sharp nails scratching the skin on my arm, but my grip was like a vice, and she couldn't break free. When she stopped struggling, I lifted her head and threw her to the side. Then I turned around and looked at the girls surrounding us with a half-smile. I was just teaching my sister a lesson. I'm sure you ladies won't interfere in family matters, right? My aura was so intimidating that they exchanged glances and wisely backed out. I wasn't worried at all that they'd tattle to the teacher. Teachers wouldn't dare to meddle in the affairs of kids from a powerful family like the Collinses. I'd pulled out a clump of Kathy's carefully maintained hair. I balled it up and threw it in her face, waiting patiently for her to come to. I'm usually not patient with my enemies. After 10 minutes passed and she still hadn't woken up, I simply slapped her twice. That did the trick. She woke up quickly, meeting her fearful gaze. I smiled. "I thought cutting your face would be a good reminder for you to stay away from me, but it seems you still have the nerve to provoke me. If you keep this up, I won't hesitate to take away your status as the heir." Kathy, at the word heir, Kathy's pupils constricted sharply. With a sudden burst of strength, she broke free from my grasp and tried to slap me. I could have easily dodged, but when I heard a familiar voice outside the restroom, I deliberately took the hit. The moment the slap landed, Louis rushed in. Kathy's expression froze when she saw Louis, quickly turning to one of panic. Louis, what are you doing here? When Louis saw my swollen cheek and the scratches on my exposed arm, his gaze turned icy as he looked at Kathy. Should I have stayed away and let you bully your sister? Kathy shot me a venomous glare. I lowered my head and subtly leaned towards Louis, without waiting for Kathy to explain. Louis scooped me up in his arms and carried me out of the restroom. After all, Kathy had grown up in the Collins family. While Louis was tending to my wounds, Mr. Collins called, sounding ready to scold me. I picked up the phone and took the initiative. Dad, I'm with Louis right now. The anger on the other end vanished instantly. Mr. Collins immediately switched to a kind tone and asked with concern, Grace, Kathy said you had a little argument at school. Are you hurt? I replied casually. It's nothing serious. Louis is helping me with my wounds. I'll hang up now. After hanging up, I turned to Louis, who was applying medicine to my arm, and asked, how did you show up there all of a sudden, like Superman? He kept his head down as he worked, saying, I was afraid someone would bully you, so I came. Remembering the school uniform Kathy had ruined, I understood why he'd been so worried. I covered my swollen left cheek, smiling at him with my uninjured right side to say thank you. Strands of unbound hair framed my face, making me look even more pitiful. My injured left face was ugly, not the kind that could evoke pity. That was a lesson I'd learned in my past life. But Louis frowned and pulled my hand away. Don't touch the wound with dirty hands. It could get infected. I was taken aback and muttered, my left cheek is swollen. It looks ugly. Louis wiped my hand clean and said earnestly, it's not ugly. Just a small flaw on a perfect jade. It'll be better in a few days. A perfect jade? Was I really that? When I got home, Mrs. and Mr. Collins were already waiting for me at the dining table. Seeing me come in with my school bag, Mr. Collins asked eagerly, Grace, why were you with Louis? I glanced at Kathy, who kept her head down, silent. I calmly recounted what had happened in the restroom, omitting the part where I'd attacked Kathy. Mr. Collins didn't care about Kathy's injuries at all. His eyes sparkled with excitement. The Santos family is one of the most powerful in the capital, and Louis is their only heir. It's great that you've gotten close to him. Great. Then he eagerly instructed me, our families made an agreement about your engagement when Louis was born. Even though it was just a joke back then, you should take it seriously. This is our chance to elevate the Collins family. A hint of mockery flashed in my eyes, but I respectfully agreed. In my past life, he'd said the same thing. But it had been to Kathy. Now, he was giving the same lecture to me. True to his word, Louis transferred to the foreign language high school. Under the gaze of countless girls, he chose me as his desk mate. Before school ended on Friday, Louis gave me an invitation to his birthday party. I readily agreed and handed the invitation to Mr. Collins when I got home. Mr. Collins was overjoyed. But Mrs. Collins insisted on bringing Kathy along. Grace hasn't been to this kind of event before. With Kathy there to guide her, she won't do anything to embarrass the Collins family. After a moment of thought, Mr. Collins agreed. Of course, I played the role of the obedient daughter, agreeing to everything Mr. Collins said. That Saturday night, wearing evening gowns, Kathy and I rode together to the Santos residence. On the way, the soundproof partition in the back seat slowly rose. Kathy sneered at me defiantly. You country bumpkin, do you even know how to dance the waltz? I gave her a cold look. What, haven't you had enough of getting beaten? She flinched instinctively at my words but then put on a brave face. I'm the young lady who grew up in the Collins family for 16 years, the rightful heir. Louis would marry someone like me. What are you? I scoffed and ignored her. Mr. Collins had gone to great lengths to make sure Louis noticed us. The gowns Kathy and I wore were from the latest haute couture collection. Accentuating my graceful figure and making me look elegant and charming, the Santos family's wealth was evident. Their residence was magnificent, making the Collins home look shabby in comparison. At the party, Mrs. Collins introduced Kathy and me to Louis's mother, a dignified and gentle noblewoman. Kathy blushed and greeted Louis, who stood beside his mother with an imposing presence. Brother Louis, it's been so long. Louis didn't even glance at her. Not that long. Weren't we in class together the day before yesterday? Kathy fell silent. I lowered my head, trying hard to suppress a smile. Mrs. Collins looked embarrassed and was about to smooth things over when Louis's mother took my hand. Your Grace, right? Louis talks about you a lot. I nodded meekly under Kathy's murderous glare. What a wonderful girl. You seemed so confident. I hope you'll take care of our Louis in the future. Then she led me to the center of the party and introduced me to the other noblewomen. When the birthday party started, Louis invited me to dance the first dance. Glancing at Kathy, who stood there seething, I gladly accepted. Kathy, watch closely, I'm going to steal your fiancé. The party lasted nearly 4 hours. Before I left, Mrs. Santos gave me a jade bracelet. It was a top-quality old pit glass-type jade. Even the well-traveled Mrs. Collins stared at it, stunned. Seeing the bracelet on my wrist, Kathy stormed off. Forgetting all about etiquette, Mrs. Collins apologized profusely to the Santos family, but Mrs. Santos just waved it off with a smile and held my hand, chatting with me for a while. Mr. Collins had already heard about the party and was waiting for me at home, full of anticipation. When I got back, he grabbed my hands excitedly. You must hold on to Louis. Now that your brother is gone, you're our only hope to elevate the Collins family. Just then, the door slammed open. Kathy, her hair disheveled, rushed into the living room, screaming, I'm the real Collins family heiress. Why is this lowly newcomer getting more attention than me? With that, she lunged at me. Mr. Collins, now obsessed with the family's wealth, grabbed her arm and threw her aside, shouting angrily, You've lived in the Collins family for 16 years, but your grades are at the bottom. Louis ignores you, and you know nothing about the family business. Do you really think you deserve to be the heir? Mrs. Collins was about to go to Kathy's aid, but Mr. Collins barked at her, Don't touch her. It's all your fault for spoiling her rotten. Now she's even defying me. The Collins household was thrown into chaos. In the end, Kathy was locked up in the basement, and I moved into her room. The next day at school, I applied for a long leave of absence on Kathy's behalf. When it was my turn to clean the blackboard, Louis noticed the jade bracelet on my hand and offered to help me. A week passed peacefully. On Friday, the driver suddenly informed me that he wouldn't be picking me up after school. I had a premonition that something was going on, so I turned on the recording function on my phone and walked back with a calm expression. Sure enough, in a back alley, a group of thugs blocked my way and stared at me with lecherous smiles. The leader was someone I had met in my previous life. He was Kathy's lover and the school bully of the foreign language high school. In my previous life, he had commanded his lackeys to tear at my clothes while he stood there with Kathy in his arms. It was only because a kind passerby called the police that I was spared from being humiliated. In this life, he looked down on me haughtily and ordered the thugs, Kathy said, to find a couple of guys to have their way with her. Remember to take a few photos and send them to the Santos family. The lackeys nodded obsequiously and then sized me up maliciously. I looked at them like they were idiots and put my hand in my pocket to call the police. After reporting the incident, I casually picked up an iron rod at my feet and said, Before the police arrive, you can choose to beg for mercy so that I'll let you go. To avoid being bullied this time, I had been practicing martial arts for more than half a year. Before I could take action, I saw Louis rushing in with his men. The well-trained bodyguards pinned the thugs to the ground, and then the police arrived in time and took them away. When I was sitting in the police station, I finally came to my senses and asked Louis, How did you find me? Louis frowned and pried open my hand to examine it carefully. Then he replied, An old lady said that a person wearing a green bracelet had been cornered by thugs in the alley. I knew it was you. After saying that, seeing that there were no wounds on my palm, he let out a sigh and admonished me, Next time you fight, don't use a rusty rod. You'll get tetanus and it'll be a disaster. I fell silent until the police came to question me. I took out the recording evidence on my phone, and the words of the school bully were crystal clear. The parents of the Collins family were urgently summoned. Mr. Collins listened to the recording with a livid face. After listening, Mr. Collins left first, and Mrs. Collins was left to deal with the remaining matters. Louis contacted his family's legal team to strive for a severe sentence for the school bully and the thugs. I went home with Mrs. Collins. On the way back, Mrs. Collins was silent for a while and then said with difficulty, Grace, Kathy is your biological sister. The corners of my mouth curled into a sarcastic smile, and I deliberately didn't respond to her. When we got home, Kathy wasn't there. Mr. Collins sat on the sofa with a gloomy expression. I said to Mrs. Collins in front of Mr. Collins, Mom, I'm not pursuing Kathy's responsibility today, not because she's my biological sister, but because she has the last name Collins. Mr. Collins' expression softened a bit, and there was even a hint of approval in his eyes as he looked at me. The corners of my mouth lifted, and I bowed my head respectfully to Mr. Collins and said, Dad, I'm going back to my room to rest. Mr. Collins was influenced by power and status. Mrs. Collins was muddle-headed, and Kathy was selfish, in Mr. Collins' eyes. The Collins family was his life. It didn't matter that I was violated. What mattered was the reputation of the Collins family. Me forgiving Kathy to protect the family's reputation was exactly what he wanted. Mrs. Collins doted on her children. After Charles died, Kathy was the apple of her eye, at least for now. Me forgiving Kathy meant that she was spared from going to jail. As for Kathy, forgiving her was just because I couldn't completely destroy her this time. The next day, I went to the police station again and confronted the disheveled school bully through the glass. He asked me wearily, "What do you want me to do so that you'll write a letter of understanding for me?" I had issued a letter of understanding for Kathy, but I hadn't written one for him yet. Looking at him, still unwilling to bow his head, I raised my eyebrows and said, "Is this the attitude you have when you're begging for help?" The school bully became agitated and slammed his handcuffed hand on the table. It was Kathy's idea. Why should I suffer here? He was supposed to go abroad next month, and this sudden detention had disrupted his plans. I smiled and said, "Kevin, I remember you got admitted to University A. You're really amazing. Do you think they'll still want you if I write a letter to the teachers at University A and tell them that you've been in jail?" The school bully finally became afraid. "What do you want? Please don't mess with me." I nodded in satisfaction and smiled. "I remember you like to record your life on video." The school bully's expression froze, and I continued, "Did my sister play the leading role in your videos?" The questions I asked weren't groundless. Before my surgery in my previous life, Louis and Kathy were about to get engaged. The school bully suddenly showed Mr. Collins a 15-second video. It was a video of Kathy sleeping with him. Mr. Collins scolded Kathy for half a month at home and finally bought the video from the school bully for $30 million. The school bully gritted his teeth. Just as he was about to refuse, I increased the stakes. "The Santos family has already collected evidence of your father's tax evasion. Now you have two choices. First, hand over the video, and I'll give you the letter of understanding, and you can go abroad and have a good time. Second, don't hand over the video, and you'll go to jail, and your family will go bankrupt and end up begging for food." I raised my eyebrows and smiled. "Think about it. I'm not comfortable sitting on this chair, so I'm leaving." I stood up. Just as I turned around, I heard an urgent cry from behind me. "I'll give you the video. It's on a USB drive in the safe in my room." I nodded in satisfaction and turned around. "Once I get the video, you can leave." At midnight, I put on Kathy's pajamas and went to the basement. I opened the door to Kathy's room. Kathy was lying on the bed with a swollen face, which was from Mr. Collins hitting her. I turned on the table lamp and waited patiently for her to wake up. Kathy woke up from the light. When she saw me sitting beside her with a smile, she shrank back in fear. I stroked Kathy's silky long hair and said gently, "Kathy, I found something interesting on the school bully's phone today. Do you want to see it?" Kathy seemed to think of something and looked at me with wide eyes, fear in her eyes like a hunted prey. I turned on my phone and played the prepared video. An indecent scene appeared on the screen, showing Kathy's distorted and blushing face. Kathy reached out to grab the phone, but I held her down. "You didn't expect that you would be filmed when you had sex, did you? Do you think Dad will abandon you quickly if I send this to the media?" Kathy's expression turned desperate, and she looked as beautiful as a dying rose. I stood up and put a bottle of medicine on the bedside table before turning to leave. Before I left, I smiled and looked back. "From today on, I'll replace you step by step and become Louis's fiancé and the person in charge of the Collins family." With that, I went upstairs to rest, feeling pleased as I stepped on Kathy's desperate cries. The next morning, when the nanny of the Collins family brought food to Kathy, she found that Kathy had slit her wrists. Fortunately, she was discovered in time and was saved. Kathy's life was saved, but she went crazy. Apart from the video taken by the school bully, the bottle of medicine I left also played a part. It was the medicine Charles had taken before his death, the medicine to relieve the rejection after the organ transplant. Kathy had secretly replaced it with an addictive drug that looked exactly the same. After Charles took it, his nerves were paralyzed, and he even ignored the rejection reaction of his kidney. If Mr. and Mrs. Collins knew the truth, would they still protect Kathy? After this incident, I became the only heir of the Collins family. I replaced Kathy as the core of the social circle. Countless young ladies who had looked down on me before extended olive branches to me, and I accepted them all. Burying the hatchet with them, Louis and I got closer and closer. On weekends, I basically visited the Santos family and attended various events with Mrs. Santos. Mr. Collins was more and more satisfied with me and gradually let me get involved in the company's decision-making. He regarded me as the heir both explicitly and implicitly. He never mentioned Kathy. In the second year of senior high school, Kathy's mental state got worse, and she even started having hallucinations. I accompanied Mrs. Collins to the mental hospital to visit Kathy. When Kathy saw me, she had an episode. I dismissed the nurses in the ward in advance and stood behind Mrs. Collins, smiling as I looked at Kathy. Mrs. Collins held Kathy in her arms lovingly, but then she heard Kathy mumbling, "I didn't kill my brother. I didn't kill him." Mrs. Collins' expression froze, and she looked down at the deranged Kathy in her arms. Kathy's eyes were glazed over. It was my brother's own fault. He deserved it. He was so sick, but he still wanted my kidney. He deserved to die. Mrs. Collins instantly understood something and threw Kathy away. The maternal love in her eyes disappeared completely, and she looked at Kathy with icy eyes. "Kathy, what are you talking about?" Kathy was thrown to the ground and suddenly broke down and screamed, "It's all your fault. Why is Charles the heir? Why can anyone climb over me? I want you all to die." With that, Kathy fell to the ground and cried. I walked up to Mrs. Collins and asked her, "Mom, considering my sister's condition, should we still take her home?" Mrs. Collins looked at Kathy on the ground expressionlessly and said coldly, "There's no need, let her stay here and recuperate for the rest of her life." I nodded and helped Mrs. Collins leave the room. Before I left, I looked back at Kathy, the person who had been so arrogant in my previous life. The one who was like Satan to me, now seemed so insignificant. Kathy's little tricks weren't hidden well. It was just that the Collins family had trusted their daughter too much at that time, so they didn't find out that she was responsible for Charles's death. After graduating from senior high school, I was admitted to the Department of Finance at B City University with the first place in the college entrance examination in the whole city. The Collins family held a grand coming-of-age ceremony for me. At the coming-of-age ceremony, Mr. Collins gave me 30% of the company's shares as a gift, and I accepted it gladly. Mr. Collins' health couldn't support the high-intensity work anymore, so he let me take over the company's decision-making power. After the coming-of-age ceremony, in front of Mrs. Santos, I invited Louis to have coffee in the greenhouse. Mrs. Santos looked at me with a gentle and kind expression and patted Louis on the back. "Go ahead, remember to take good care of Grace." Louis's ears turned red, but he still followed me. The greenhouse was the only place in the Collins family without surveillance, and it was very suitable for plotting something underhanded. I sat down on the chair and got straight to the point. "I want you to help me get rid of my father. I'll provide the evidence, and you help me pave the way so that he'll spend the rest of his life in jail." Louis thought I would talk about something romantic, but he didn't expect me to say something like this. He didn't ask me why and readily agreed to my request. I was a bit surprised. "Aren't you going to ask me why?" Louis shook his head. "You're always thorough in your actions. There must be a good reason for this." I nodded and discussed a few things with him. Then we went back to the coming-of-age ceremony. Half a month after the coming-of-age ceremony, someone anonymously reported that Mr. Collins was involved in organ trafficking, and the evidence provided was Bella's autopsy report. The report showed that Bella was missing a kidney. At the same time, in the psychological test organized by the school, it was shown that Bella was mentally normal and had no tendency of depression at all. As soon as the public opinion broke out, the stock price of the Collins family plummeted. At the same time, a marketing account exposed that the Collins family had evaded taxes. For a while, the Collins family was criticized by everyone and faced a huge crisis. Mr. Collins was afraid that the public opinion would make the Collins family collapse, so he simply transferred all his shares to me, trying to sever the relationship between the Collins family and himself in the public opinion. This was exactly what I wanted. With 51% of the shares, I completely controlled the Collins family. Taking advantage of this crisis, I replaced the senior management of the Collins family. Mr. Collins' confidant was removed from power by me. After firing a few stubborn old guys, new blood was injected into the Collins family. The company's management was loyal to me, and Mr. Collins became an outsider completely. By the time he realized what was happening, the situation had changed completely. The surgery was done in the private hospital of the Collins family, and I easily got all the evidence. The public opinion fermented so much that with the help of the Santos family, Mr. Collins was arrested very quickly. when I went to the detention center to visit Mr. Collins, he still delusionally hoped that I would bail him out. I smiled and said to him, "Dad, do you know who let the so-called justice-seeking people get Bella's autopsy report?" Mr. Collins was old, but his IQ was still there. He immediately realized that I was behind all this, and his face twisted in anger. "So it was you. You bastard, I treated you well." I looked at his old face and sneered. If Bella hadn't replaced me in the Collins family, I would have died on the operating table. Mr. Collins wanted to say something, but the visiting time was up, and the prison guard grabbed Mr. Collins' arm and took him away. Mr. Collins struggled constantly. He wanted to kill me through the glass. I smiled and waved goodbye to him. The lawyer next to me, who had a lot of experience, asked me calmly, "Miss Grace, should I handle Mr. Collins' case as I see fit?" I smiled at him. "Thank you, Lawyer Tom. I'll make sure you're satisfied with the lawyer's fee after the case is closed." Lawyer Tom nodded and exchanged a knowing look with me. When I got home, Mrs. Collins had red eyes from staying up. She looked at me with hope in her eyes. "Grace, is your father okay?" I took off my coat and smiled. "Dad committed premeditated murder and will probably be sentenced to death." When Mrs. Collins heard this, her eyes rolled back and she fainted. I didn't have the patience to wait for her to wake up. I gave a look to the private doctor next to me, and the doctor stepped forward and pinched Mrs. Collins' philtrum hard to wake her up. I crossed my legs and smiled at her. "Mom, you got sick because you were worried about Dad's safety. Your health is so poor, you'd better stay in the Northmount Sanatorium to recuperate." The Northmount Sanatorium was a place specializes in caring for patients who have gone insane due to major stimulation. When Mrs. Collins heard this, she panicked and screamed, "Grace, you bitch, I'm not sick, I'm not sick." I snapped my fingers, and the staff waiting outside burst in and carried her to the car going to the sanatorium. In my previous life, after my surgery, I was infected with a virus. I begged Mrs. Collins to treat me, but she wanted me to die so that she could get rid of the witness of their kidney removal. She let me die without treatment. Now, let her stay in the sanatorium for the rest of her life and atone for what she did in my previous life. 2 months later, Mr. Collins's verdict was announced. He was convicted of intentional homicide for harvesting the organs of a minor, resulting in death, and was sentenced to death. The hatred from my past life dissipated on the day the verdict took effect. In this second chance at life, I saved myself, took revenge on my enemies, and gained control of the Collins family. This life has been worth it. I was the only one left in the vast Collins mansion. Mrs. Santos, fearing I would be lonely, urged Louis to propose to me so that I could move into the Santos family residence. Louis and I had mutual feelings for each other, so we went along with it and got engaged. At the engagement party, Louis smiled like he had won the lottery and wouldn't let go of my hand. As a sign of her sincerity, Mrs. Santos transferred 5% of the Santos family's shares to me. The past cannot be changed, but the future ahead is bright. It's time for me to embrace an even better future. Side story, Louis's perspective. The first time I met her was at the orphanage where she lived. Back then, my mother was there to discuss a donation with the orphanage director. As a young boy, I was left on the orphanage lawn to sunbathe. She was surrounded by a group of little girls. The ringleader, plump and round, stood in stark contrast to her tiny frame. Just as it seemed she was about to be bullied, I stepped in and chased the bullies away. She timidly thanked me, with the corners of her eyes drooping, looking as cute as a little rabbit. I noticed the name tag on her chest, Grace. The next time I saw her was at the start of high school. The homeroom teacher asked me to help organize student information. One student stood out in particular. She had no parents and was an orphan. My heart skipped a beat. I found her name, and as I expected, it was her. I asked the homeroom teacher to seat me next to her, and the teacher readily agreed. After more than 10 years apart, she had grown up, even her eyes had changed. The former timidity had transformed into brightness and sharpness. She clearly didn't remember me. She greeted me briefly and then took out her textbooks to study. I knew her science grades weren't good, so I explained problems to her every day after class. She was highly motivated and quickly rose from being an average student to the second highest scorer in the grade. Our conversations gradually shifted from dull study topics to life in general. I occasionally asked her why she didn't smile often. Her answer surprised me. She said she was afraid that smiling too much would make her forget the pain she had endured, and that smiles would erode her determination. I was confused. We were only 16. How could there be so much suffering? I tried to ask her out. I even dressed up carefully, but when she got off the bus wearing a school uniform and carrying an old school bag, she said indifferently, "I'm an orphan, I don't have money to buy nice clothes." I was a bit at a loss, but fortunately, she didn't seem to care. She just lowered her head and solved problems with me. At the end of the first semester of senior high school, news came from the Collins family that the young lady they had brought back from the orphanage had died. She committed suicide. I didn't think much of it. The Collins family had a poor moral character, and there was probably more to her death than met the eye. But it had nothing to do with me. The next day, I still asked her out. She was wearing a burgundy dress and looked as beautiful as a painting just sitting there. I was a bit shy to look at her and asked why she was dressed so nicely. She smiled at me for the first time, her eyes curving as she said it was her birthday. I guessed the orphanage wouldn't have bought her a cake, so I got one for her. When I got home, my mother noticed my happy mood and teased me, asking if I had gone out with someone I liked. I blushed and remained silent. Since a mother knows her son best, she immediately realized I had a crush. After a week of being pestered, I finally confessed that it was my new desk mate, Grace. During the final term parents' meeting, my mother sat in my seat. She didn't see Grace in person, but she saw a large stack of awards and test papers with scores close to perfect. When Grace came back, my mother asked me why such an excellent student didn't have a parent to attend the meeting. I told her Grace was an orphan. My mother was silent for a long time and said with pity, "Poor child, life is so unfair." During the winter vacation, my mother came back from a social event and said the Collins family had found their real long-lost daughter, and her name was Grace. She also said that although the girl had grown up in an orphanage, her manners were elegant and she seemed more like a noble lady than the previous girl in the Collins family. I was a bit worried. Kathy was notoriously arrogant and domineering. Could Grace handle her? Sure enough, she was bullied by Kathy. On the first day of school, I saw her wearing an old, oversized school uniform that clearly wasn't hers. She said it belonged to Charles and that Kathy had ruined her own clothes. Even so, I could still see the milk stains that hadn't dried on the uniform. I guessed Kathy was behind that too. I gave her my clothes, and then she touched my hand and gave me a hug. After that, she said she was transferring schools. I was worried. Transferring to Kathy's school seemed like walking into a den of wolves. I had to protect her. 2 weeks later, I completed the transfer procedures and was led to the classroom by the teacher. The girls in the classroom were whispering among themselves, saying Grace was doomed, that if Kathy cornered her in the restroom, she would be severely hurt even if she didn't die. I rushed to the restroom and saw Kathy hitting her. I was too late. I took her out of the restroom and treated her wounds in the infirmary. During that time, Mr. Collins called to scold her. I watched her use my name to fend off trouble and secretly smiled. Soon, my birthday arrived. I sent her an invitation, and she attended in a gorgeous outfit. My mother couldn't take her eyes off her. I knew my mother was very satisfied with her. She even gave her the family heirloom jade bracelet. We danced the first dance together. It was the first time I held a girl's hand. Her hand was soft and delicate. She was also a bit shy and kept her eyes down, avoiding my gaze. I didn't dare to move my hand on her waist, feeling as if warm jade was emitting a soft glow. After the birthday party, our relationship deepened. My mother even reluctantly approached Mrs. Collins to learn more about Grace, but Mrs. Collins said Grace was no match for Kathy. When my mother repeated this to me, she rolled her eyes and said Mrs. Collins was talking nonsense. On a Friday, I was on duty and left school late. I saw the Collins family's driver looking anxious at the school gate. I went up and asked. The driver said he had lost his phone and couldn't get in touch with Grace. He also asked if I knew if she was still at school. Sure enough, I arrived in time and saved Grace from the thugs who had cornered her. At the police station, I promised her that I would make those who bullied her pay dearly. But our conversation was interrupted by Mrs. Collins, who rushed in. Since the matter involved Kathy, Mrs. Collins tried to downplay it. When Mr. Collins saw our clasped hands, he knew which side to take. I gave her the evidence of the school bully's family's tax evasion and let her decide what to do with it. Later, she became a frequent guest at my house. My mother liked her capable personality and keenly perceived her hatred for the Collins family. She would take Grace around the house every day, treating her almost like a daughter. At her coming-of-age ceremony, she was straightforward and told me she wanted to send her father to prison. She also admitted that her poor little thing act was all an act, that Bella's death was related to her, that she had set a trap for Kathy to bully her, and that in the end, she used my love for her to completely get rid of Kathy. If you think I'm disgusting, then let's break up. You're so kind and good, and I don't deserve you, she said with a cold expression. But her hanging hands trembled slightly. I sighed and opened her clenched fist. I not only know that you did all this, but I also know that our meeting in high school was your plan, that you deliberately got close to me and used me as a means to control the Collins family. But baby, I'm willing. The private detectives of the Santos family aren't useless. I knew your purpose the first day we sat at the same desk, when the private detective gave me all her information. I felt but didn't want to stop her from doing what she wanted. Don't persuade others to be kind without experiencing their suffering. I just needed to ensure her safety and wait for her at the finish line. She was stunned after hearing my explanation and finally threw herself into my arms, hugging me tightly, like a proud little cat letting down its guard. She finally showed her vulnerable side. Later, she confessed everything to my mother. I thought my mother would be angry for being kept in the dark, but instead, she hugged her tightly and cried out of pity, "Poor child, you've suffered so much." Grace and I were flustered as we tried to comfort my mother. In the end, my mother waved her hand and said, "From now on, Grace is my own daughter. If anyone dares to bully my daughter, the Santos family will never let it go." So, the Santos family provided a lot of help in sending Mr. Collins to prison. On the day the verdict was executed, she lay on me, stretching like a cat, and had the first peaceful sleep in over a decade. The ending of the story is beautiful and warm. The girl I had loved for more than 10 years wore the engagement ring I gave her, and we lived happily ever after. Side story, the engagement party and daily life. Grace's perspective, after sorting out the mess of the Collins family. Louis and I got engaged under the urging of Mrs. Santos. Half of the high society figures in the capital attended our engagement party. Most of them came to offer their blessings, but there were also some thoughtless people who asked about the whereabouts of Mrs. Collins and Kathy. Before I could even come up with a perfunctory answer, Mrs. Santos stepped in front of me with a fake smile and dismissed them in a few words. At high society engagement parties, there is always a competition regarding dowries and betrothal gifts. During the pre-party reception, Louis and I were greeting guests together. Just after seeing off a couple who came to offer their congratulations, we heard two girls in red dresses whispering, thinking we couldn't hear them. Does Grace really think she's found true love, now that she's the only one left to hold up the Collins family? Once she marries in, all of the Collins family's assets will belong to the Santos family. Exactly, just look at her humble background. She probably doesn't even realize that and is counting the money for them while being deceived. I paused in the middle of pouring wine and looked at Louis, his brows furrowed, and he was about to step forward to stop them, but I held him back. The girls in the corner, feeling guilty, turned around and saw us. They were so scared that they ran away. Louis looked at me in confusion. I picked up my wine glass calmly and explained. The girl with her back to me is the one I stuffed a dead mouse into her clothes on my first day at the foreign language high school. The girl facing me, her father is that executive who embezzled $30 million from me. He's already in prison making umbrellas. In other words, they had already suffered enough, and there was no need for further revenge. Louis burst out laughing and pulled me to find Mrs. Santos. When the engagement ceremony began, since I had no living relatives, Mrs. Santos stood by my side. The MC read out the long list of betrothal gifts item by item. In the end, the Santos family's gift of 5% of their equity, given free of charge, amazed everyone present. My dowry, on the other hand, was just an orange cat named Lucky that I found in the Santos family's back garden. When the marriage contract was signed, Mrs. Santos said in front of all the high society families in the city, the Santos family has never coveted a daughter-in-law's dowry. Our Grace is the legitimate wife of the Santos family, brought in with full ceremonial honors. Everyone here, from now on, Grace is a member of the Santos family. As long as the Santos family exists, no one can lay a finger on her. These words were not empty threats. After Mrs. Collins was sent to the sanatorium, she hated me deeply and had already incited several families to disrupt my business. A few days ago, a minor thug, acting on someone else's orders, came at me with a knife. I kicked him so hard that he flew away and landed on the ground, knife in hand, completely defeated. But after this engagement, I guessed no one would dare to cause me trouble. After all, the Santos family is one of the most powerful families in the capital, and no one would be foolish enough to provoke them. After the engagement party, Louis and I returned to the Santos family residence. Mrs. Santos had already had someone neatly pack all my belongings, and my room was right next to Louis's bedroom. When Lucky saw me come home, it meowed and then hooked its claws onto my pants, leaping into my arms. Holding it, I felt the soft, fluffy body of the orange and white kitten, which suddenly reminded me of my days in the orphanage. There was a well-dressed little boy who squatted down and used a handkerchief to gently wipe the dirt off my wounds bit by bit. Next to me lay a small cat. Even though it was injured, it clung tightly to my body. I suddenly looked up, and the face of the boy in my memory gradually overlapped with Louis beside me. I heard myself asking, "Louis, did we meet once when we were very young?" Louis seemed to have expected this question and looked at me with a smile. "You finally remembered. Back then, I was young, because I did well in school. Bella bullied me constantly. I was kind-hearted and vulnerable at that time. When bullied, I didn't dare to speak up and could only shed tears while covering my wounds. Fortunately, there was an orange cat by my side. It was born to a wild cat nearby but was abandoned by its mother because it was weak. I felt we shared the same misfortune, so I secretly raised it in the orphanage. I witnessed Bella and her lackeys catch other kittens and pour chili water into their eyes as a cruel prank. I watched them laugh heartily while I could only cower in a corner, trembling, to keep them from discovering Orange. I broke Bella's favorite cup. As a result, the director threw my bedding into the attic, and from then on, Orange and I relied on each other in that attic. But the price was that Bella bullied me even more severely and led all the children in the orphanage to isolate me. The repeated bullying pushed me to the brink of collapse. When they bullied Orange, my desire to commit suicide reached its peak. At that moment, a handsome boy suddenly appeared, driving away Bella and her followers. He then used a handkerchief to clean the wound on my knee and sat down beside me to talk. He listened to me pour out my feelings. When he heard that I wanted to commit suicide, he immediately persuaded me. "I know you're heartbroken from being bullied, but the best way to get revenge isn't to end your own life. It's to live better than them and make them jealous." Looking at my confused expression, he sighed maturely for his age, gently rubbed the bruise on my forehead, and pulled me up from the grass. The director in the distance called him "young master," and he hesitated for a moment before responding loudly. Seeing that he was about to leave, I quickly grabbed him. "Can you help me find a home for Orange so that it doesn't have to suffer with me?" He nodded without hesitation, picked up Orange, which was licking its fur, and said to me, "Then you have to promise me that you will definitely survive and get out of here no matter what." With tears in my eyes, I nodded vigorously. He squeezed my hand again before running back with Orange in his arms. After that brief episode, my life returned to normal. Bella still disliked me, but as I grew older, my heart was no longer as fragile as it used to be. I stuck to my promise with the boy and managed to survive tenaciously. Occasionally, Orange would climb over the orphanage wall to play with me. The boy had entrusted it to the family next door to the orphanage. Presumably, he had paid handsomely, because Orange was well taken care of and had a shiny coat. During countless hopeless days and nights, the swaying tail of Orange and the boy's clear voice always supported me, urging me to keep going. With red eyes and a sniffle, my voice tinged with sobs, I asked, "Why didn't you tell me it was you earlier? Why did you make me wait so long?" Louis put his arm around my waist and patted me as if comforting a child. Our Grace was meticulously planning her revenge. How could I let love get in the way of that? His pats tickled me, and I pretended to hit him, but he caught my fist and held it in his palm. Lucky is Orange's granddaughter. The owner said it was thin and small and needed special care, so I brought it back. I originally wanted to give it to you in a more formal way, but who knew Lucky was so naughty? It escaped. As soon as I turned around, thinking of Lucky running around in the back garden, I smiled. Lucky has a great appetite at home and has scratched 3 of my clothes. Where is it? Thin and small. I think the previous owner just thought Lucky was too naughty, so they gave it to you, you big fool. Louis, the summer afternoon was warm and cozy. Lucky curled up on me, and I leaned against Louis. Both the cat and I stretched lazily, found a comfortable position, and took a nap. No winter is too cold to overcome, and no spring will fail to arrive. Now, I'm going to walk hand in hand with my spring. Later, Louis and I went to study at B City University, to manage the company more conveniently in the future. We both chose business administration majors. My roommate was a girl named Riley. I knew about her. She was the daughter of the George family from H City and also a business prodigy, at just 18. She had firmly established herself in the business world. We had surprisingly similar hobbies and compatible personalities, so we became good friends very quickly. Since Riley and I were always together, I naturally didn't have much time alone with Lewis. Even so, some people still envied our daily interactions. That person was Mandy, the eldest son of the Lincoln family and Lewis's roommate. If Lewis was my fiancé, then Mandy was Riley's unconfessed admirer. When the four of us went out, Lewis and I were affectionate in the front, while Mandy and Riley were silent behind us. They didn't even hold hands, determined to uphold pure love to the end. The coursework at B City University was intense, especially during mid-terms and finals. When Riley and I got busy, we often forgot to eat, and in the end, we both ended up in the infirmary due to stomach problems. Lewis was so angry that he pointed at my forehead and lectured me. I simply used my coquettish tactics and managed to soothe him. In contrast, Mandy waited on Riley like a timid spouse. Finally, he would look at Lewis and me playing around with a resentful expression, hesitating to speak to Riley. Riley drank her medicine calmly, looking unperturbed. Lewis and I exchanged a look and smiled knowingly. Mandy was such a fool. Riley had been waiting for his confession for so long, but he was still too hesitant to speak up. I suddenly thought Lewis was really great. At least he knew how to express his feelings. At the end of the first semester of freshman year, someone from the sanatorium messaged me, saying that Mrs. Collins had tried to commit suicide. She was caught by the foot while jumping off a building and pulled back, dislocating her right leg. I sneered and replied, "Let her make a fuss, don't stop her next time she tries to jump." After replying, I pushed open the dormitory door and heard Riley standing on the balcony, answering a call with a cold expression. "Go ahead and make trouble. If you don't behave yourself in the mental hospital, don't blame me for taking action against your family. I mean it." Then, I watched her hang up the phone and come back looking exhausted. I hesitated, but finally chose my words carefully and said, "Riley, if you have anything on your mind, I can share the burden with you." She rubbed her temples, was silent for a long time, and finally started to speak. I heard her story. A desperate and dark one, but also one of rising from the ashes. After that earthquake, her grandmother died. My aunt joined the search and rescue team and searched in the ruins for 5 days and 5 nights as a volunteer, but never found her. To get revenge, my aunt made me the daughter of the George family. The George family killed my loved ones. It's only right that I bring their family to ruin. Her eyes turned fierce, but in the end, she leaned against the wall, feeling drained. Maybe I'm just too tired from the final exam week. I'm sorry for saying so many negative things. I hope you don't think less of me. I shook my head, stepped forward, and hugged her. "Riley is the best Riley in the world. You're strong and independent. How could I ever think badly of you?" She was stunned, and finally, she awkwardly hugged me back. That night, I held her hand and told her my story. We teased each other, competing to see who had had a more pitiful life. In the end, we concluded that Riley seemed to have had it worse. At least I had Lewis, while Mandy, that thick-headed fool, still hadn't dared to confess. Thankfully, a senior who confessed publicly gave Mandy a wake-up call. Lewis and I watched from the crowd as Mandy pulled Riley into a car, and then we looked at each other and smiled. Finally, they got together. Extra, daily trivia. 1. About the jade bracelet. The bracelet was given to me by Mrs. Santos. Since she said it was a family heirloom when she gave it to me, I cherished it and kept it carefully stored away. It wasn't until Lucky climbed up and knocked the box off the top of the cabinet that Lewis remembered its existence. I was heartbroken, but Lewis looked at me blankly and took out a row of identical bracelets from the safe. My dad said that when my mom was young, she was very active, so he bought a whole row of bracelets as family heirlooms, and now they're all passed on to us. I was stunned by the Santos family's extravagance. After that, I wore the bracelet while running around the house, even joining Lucky in its playful antics. 2. About Lucky. Lucky is full of energy. In its previous home, it was a little troublemaker, incredibly strong, and could drink half of its mother cat's milk by itself. As it grew older, it became even more mischievous, even daring to rummage through its grandmother cat's nest. The owner couldn't take it anymore. Just when the new owner, me, came to visit, The previous owner threw a tantrum and finally managed to give Lucky away. When Lucky came to the Santos family, it found a kindred spirit in me, a beautiful, two-legged creature. This creature, me, shared many similar habits with it, such as being picky eaters, loving nighttime adventures, marking territory by rubbing against things, and constantly acting cute to get attention from the caretaker, Louis. Lucky was very happy. So it frolicked around the house with its companion. Even when it got into trouble, it could just act cute and end up back in the caretaker's arms, being fed treats. 3. About the betrothal gifts. The Santos family adored me, so the betrothal gifts they gave me were countless. Plus, Mrs. Santos is a shopaholic, and her collection of jewelry piled up like a mountain. Finally getting the chance to give it all away, she simply gave everything to her daughter-in-law, me. One day, on a whim, I put on all the jewelry and swayed in front of Louis to show off. Lucky also joined in, decked out in gold and silver, struggling to follow behind me. Louis was on the phone with his assistant at the time, when he turned around and saw the two glittering light balls, me and Lucky, standing in the study. For a moment, he thought he was at an old-fashioned disco, but then he thought, if it could make Grace, who was always calm, guarded, and distant, let down her guard and be playful, a little chaos was worth it. After hearing the story above, what are your thoughts? Feel free to share your opinions in the comments section. Looking forward to hearing from you. If you liked this story, don't forget to like it, share it, and subscribe to my channel. See you next time.